that's an easy target. I was telling some of my folks at the table about, I've been working in communities, primarily communities of color, on environmental justice. And what I find is, you always know it's injustice when you see them trying to tear down or build over a black cemetery. This is not the first community that I worked in where a black cemetery has been the target. So I don't care about you living, and I don't care about your damn dead. That's what's happening, right? That's environmental racism. I'm going to get into that. And this is reality. So when we use these terms of environmental racism, I'm going to use another term, environmental slavery. That's not being provocative. For folks who living with these hazards, folks who living with pipelines, folks who living with fracking, folks who living with gas well, kids going to schools by these facilities, what you think they're dealing with? Pregnant mothers. Think about, I'm going to talk, let's do a little bit of science. So you've been exposed to toxicants. What happened to that fetus? That fetus has also been exposed to those toxicants. Right? So you can have developmental effects in the womb, in utero. So there are these sensitive windows of susceptibility for our children. So let me say this, if you think about environmental justice, if you really want to have a healthy community, how can we put America first if we don't put our kids first? How can you build this facility near a school? That means we don't care about those kids. We're throwing away those kids. Remember I just said, sensitive windows of susceptibility. Blood-brain barrier hasn't fully developed. Immune systems, organs still developing, right? Kids who are outside playing, not being serious, not playing the video games, higher inhalation rates per kilogram body weight than adults. There's reason why kids are more susceptible. Reasons why we should protect them. Okay? Still on my first slide. Let me keep it moving. So I have like 75 slides. I'm not going to go through all of them. So when you think about this social movement, right? The social movement, you can look at, I'm not going to say too much about these slides, but work in Houston, Texas by Dr. Bullard, who's known as the father of the environmental justice movement. You got the PCB landfill fight in Warren County. You can see, I think you can see in the photo, Benjamin Chavis. So Benjamin Chavis at one point in time was the president of the NAACP. So there is a history of the NAACP being very engaged in the EJ movement. I hear that y'all are trying to engage some of the chapters in this area. There's a way to do that, and I'll try to get to, speak to that a little bit before I end the day. Now, here's the definition of environmental justice. The first definition, we want to protect everybody, all lives matter definition. I hate that definition, right? Because regardless of race, ethnicity, culture, income, education level, with respect to development, implementation, and enforcement of laws and regulations. We know that's the goal, but we know that everybody's not protected. We know that laws not equally enforced. I always try to bring in Flint as an example. What happened in Flint, for example, with the lead issue and the water crisis, wouldn't happen in Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's why I did my postdoc. Wouldn't happen in Ann Arbor. So with Flint, you see the intersection of race, class, place, vulnerability, hazards, and invisibility. The invisibility gets to that voice again. Having voice, having power. Second definition is Bunya Bryant, just from a public health perspective. This definition highlights a lot of social determinants of health. Environmental justice, decent paying and safe jobs. Not crap jobs, right? I mean, when I was here a few years ago, I did a report on the public health impacts of fracking in Maryland. And we came to West Virginia to interview folks about the impacts of fracking, okay? And at the same time, the irony is my dad is a pipe fitter. Just to give you a little bit of background, my dad worked at nuclear power plants. I grew up near a landfill, a large hallway, a sewage treatment plant, a concrete plant. That's the reason why I do what I do. But my dad, when I was here in West Virginia, my dad was in West Virginia building a pipeline. Okay, and you talk about jobs, where was that money going that my dad made? Did it stay in West Virginia? No, it got sent back home to Mississippi. So that's the irony of my own lived experience and my own contribution to my family to the impacts in your community. But that's what happens when you talk about jobs. Most of those jobs are short-term construction jobs. That money doesn't stay in the community, right? That's econ development, okay? Con job, y'all. Okay? Healthcare, quality schools and recreation, decent housing, democratic decision-making, personal empowerment, communities free of violence, drugs, and poverty. Culture and biological diversity are respected. Distributed justice prevails. This is what environmental justice is. It's a holistic framework. It's talking about where we live, work, play, pray, learn. Okay? It's talking about micro-environments that we live in. It's making sure that those who are most vulnerable, most susceptible, that their voices are heard, they're not overburdened. okay? You have environmental racism. Benjamin Chavis, who I mentioned, when he was fighting against the PCB landfill in Warren County, he coined the term environmental racism. You also have environmental classism. So the targeting in the area because of people's race, classism targeting the area where it has because of people's class, right? And so what happens is it's the avenue of least resistance. Again, if you don't have economic power, you don't have political power, and once you get one, you get two. Once you get two, you get three. Once you get three, you get four. Once you get four, you get five. Why is it that zoning, you have industrial zoning near poor folks? You don't have industrial zoning near wealthy people because we don't value those folks. That's the bottom line. Regardless of science, the science is the science. The science does not tell the full story. We do not value those individuals. It could be skin color, it could be income, it could be language, right? It could be education. We do not value those folks. So let me skip through this. Principles of environmental justice. One of the things I just want to highlight, this is very much as I said, for a holistic framework. And I like to say, this is important for y'all, I'm about to say, not every environmentalist is environmental justice activist, but every environmental justice activist is environmentalist. Look at the principles. Sacredness of Mother Earth. We just had Earth Day. Public policy, mutual respect and justice to all peoples. Balance and responsible use of land and renewable resources. Universe protection, nuclear testing. Political, but the thing is, it's about civil rights, human rights. One of the points about this is about communities speak with their own voices, right? When I think about environmental justice, that differential burden of hazards, as I've already said, sometimes communities that have these issues have a high concentration of psychosocial stressors, and then they have I know I'm talking fast, I'm from Mississippi. We talk fast. It's a joke, but I am from Mississippi. I talk fast. Everybody else talks slow, okay? And also I don't want to have a lot of time, I had too many slides, so I'm gonna slow down a little bit. I'll skip around for y'all, but also what's important is the access to amenities. So there's differential access to amenities. Maybe not having access to green space. Y'all heard the whole term food deserts and food swamps. There's a lot of research about the differential access to food infrastructure, differential access to housing infrastructure, differential access to transportation infrastructure, differential access to green space, differential access to clean rivers and streams. Those things are also environmental justice issues. Now, I didn't have this slide in originally, but I would say, go ahead, put it in. Okay, so this is real. Oh my God, environmental slavery. Doctor, you good? I was talking to some community members. It's like, Jacoby, we're being used to host these land uses. We're being used as sinks for pollution, right? We don't get any benefit from hosting these land uses. That's slavery. That's oppression. So this is not something I came up with. I added like some extra academic-y words in there to make it sound, smart. But this is really from communities, their experiences. I'm gonna show you some of the communities I work with so you can realize what they're going through. So y'all can understand that you have other folks going through the same thing. We need to have solidarity, right? Before I forget about it, we are having a symposium on May 11th at College Park, our 5th University of Maryland Environmental Justice and Health Disparity Symposium. The theme is health, law, and policy. There's going to be a lot of lawyers there, okay? So I want folks from here to come there because we need to get folks organized and fighting back. Science is good, and I'm going to talk about the science again. I'm a scientist, but there's also other things that need to happen. We need lawyers. You can't go into a meeting naked. You got to have your lawyers, okay? That's a quote from one of my community mentors, not my quote. He said, I got tired of going in naked to these meetings, so he had to get his own lawyers, okay? But so you have these, communities who are absorbing these externalities, social, environmental, and health externalities. And also what happens is, communities become stuck. But guess what happens? If that factory's been built, our property values going up or going down? They're going down. You're gonna be, if you got your house that's been in your home, in your family for generations, you're losing equity. You're losing wealth. You're losing the cultural, it's still culturally valuable to you, but you're losing that asset. So people get stuck in those homes. And say you do have a mortgage. That's even more problematic, right? So property values are stuck. So these facilities, in many ways, they kill communities. They kill communities. But again, that's economic development. Con job, y'all. And then what happens is we talk about the epigenetics, the genome changes. So it can impact you across your life course. Remember I mentioned the susceptibility, the window susceptibility for children. What you're exposed to early on in life can impact you across the life course. So you think about this scientifically, you have multiple chemicals you've been exposed to. Some of the panelists before talked about this. You have the chemical mixtures. Our science, as an exposure scientist, our science is not keeping up with exposures that people are going through every day. We don't do a job with chemical mixtures. Some of these chemicals, not only do they cause asthma, they could cause, they can mutate your DNA, right? They can have a developmental effect. They can have a reproductive effect, right? And they could be in combination with other stressors. And then you think about environmental justice, just not the chemical agents. Don't forget about your poor housing stock. It could be the biological agents too. It could be the physical stressors, noise pollution. Plus, you got to add on psychosocial stressors, okay? So the allostatic load, the fact that you can't get out, you're stuck in this house, you can't escape, right? Fight or flight, C-reactive protein, cortisol levels, inflammation, right? Oxidation, you heard this, oxidative stress. This is what people are experiencing. Now, when they say it to you, they may say, wow, I'm not sure what's happening to me, but my kid is sick all the time. That's telling that story qualitatively, but the science can tell you some of it, but our science is not good enough. See, if our science isn't good enough, why are we still permitting these facilities? Right? Think about that. If our science is not good enough, why are we permitting these facilities? So I like to say that the EPA permits poison and does not prescribe public health. State agencies permit poison and don't prescribe public health. Now, I should have said before that, I love the EPA. I was funded by the EPA as an undergrad and grad student. But at the same time, it does not prevent me from saying what I need to say, right? I'm also on the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. So NEJAC provides recommendations to the EPA on environmental justice issues. They're meeting in DC next week. So there's a public commenting on Tuesday night. Public comment is going to go for, I think, from 7 to 11. We're going to stay all night long, all the members of NEJAC. So if y'all want to be there to talk about this issue, please come to the public commenting session. Again, National Environmental Justice Advisory Council meeting in DC, public commenting Tuesday night. I think it starts at 7 o'clock. You can submit written comments, or you can just come up and do your verbal comments. Everybody gets 5 minutes to speak. Okay? So y'all can bring a whole bus load of folks. Get your 5 minutes, shut it down. Take it over and shut it down. Okay? That's one of your opportunities to do that. Okay, let me keep it moving. I'm only on slide 6, I think. So, and when you think about environmental science, the burden disparities lead to exposure disparities, lead to risk disparities, to health disparities. Other terms that are relevance. It's the cumulative impacts. Our science cannot take into account cumulative impacts of these hazards. And when we permit, we act like we're permitting something in a vacuum in many cases. Like there's nothing else already there. There's no other health issues already there, right? And I also like to say, speaking of the earlier issue about monitoring, so you got a monitor that's doing this regional average, right? I think Anna talked about this before. It's 20 miles from my house. You're going to use that information and say, this is what I'm exposed in my house. That's bad science. That's called exposure misclassification. So what you have, that's bad science in, bad policy out. The academic term is exposure misclassification. Y'all just say bad science in, bad policy out. That's what it is. Bad science in, bad policy out. You got this sparse network of monitors, but you continue to permit these facilities, and you're really not using good science to understand what the current levels of pollution are and what the impacts will be. And then you have NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. You may have your state level NEPA where they're not required to look at health impacts. So you complain about this factory, well, it's going to impact air quality. Well, how's the air quality impacting me? You're complaining because the health impacts, but they are not required to look at health in NEPA. That's a weak law. But you look at the Endangered Species Act. I'm not saying anything wrong. I love me some animals and trees and bugs. I'm just saying the language there, the protective language. Have that same protective language in NEPA, we wouldn't be here today having this conversation. Okay? We wouldn't need to be here to have this conversation today. So there needs to be some changes to our laws and regulations. So the science is part of it. But we know that our regulatory schema now is really broke. The system is broken. If you think about a curve like your average exposure in the middle, you have the tails, right? It may be good enough for the people with average exposures, but what about the people who are differently exposed and people with maximum exposed? And remember, from a scientific perspective, susceptibility and vulnerability are two different things. Susceptibility is intrinsic, like biological, your age, immune status, genetic predisposition. Vulnerability is extrinsic, so it's external to you. So social vulnerability, economic vulnerability, geographic vulnerability. So what about folks who have the intersection of both multiple susceptibilities and multiple vulnerabilities? Our regulations are not protective of folks with the intersectionality of multiple susceptibilities and multiple vulnerabilities. That's true. Right? That's a core problem. That's a core problem. So we have to fix that. So I did a Facebook post on Earth Day called Make Earth Day Great Again. And what I said is we need to fix our regulatory schema. We need to go back to making it better. What we did from like phase 1 from 70 to now was good, but for vulnerable populations, those who are overburdened, it's not protective enough. So what can we do? How am I looking on time? Who's timekeeper? 20? Okay, oh, good. Okay, 45 more slides, let's go. So a lot of my work, I do a lot of community engagement, and I do a lot of what I call is called community-based persistent research. I'll just cover a couple of these slides, but I mean, as a scientist, I try to engage communities, right? And so a big part of what I do is work with communities. We try to build trust. So from left to right, as you go from left to right, from outreach to community-driven, you want to have more involvement, you want to have more impact, you want to have trust and more communication. Think about it. The best parts of a good relationship are also the best parts of a good partnership, right? So y'all can name a few things. You got trust. What about Aretha Franklin? What's she talking about? Respect, okay. You want to have communication, you want to have openness, you want to have transparency, right? And so these are the foundations of good relationships, also the foundations of good partnerships. And so as a scientist, I mean, I'm trying to provide technical assistance and trying to support communities to bring good science, bring the best science that I can to bear. But also, we got to have good community organizing as well. Folks got to be able to step out and step up. You just can't send money. That's not good enough. You got to show up. You got to use Ike and Mike, your feet, to go to the politicians. You're going to have to boycott. You're going to have to protest. You have to get a little exercise and do a little bit of walking and marching. We got to do more of that to make it. This isn't my democracy. Voting is not democracy. Being civically engaged is just not voting. To make democracy work, you got to put in work. Okay, so y'all are doing that by being here. We got to bring in other folks too to be a part of this. Again, more solidarity. Building those bridges, right, and having more solidarity, and we've been actively engaged in the social movement. That's how you're gonna get this fight won, get this battle won. So I do CPPR. All of this is getting communities, engaged in all stages of the research process. Community knowledge, what I want to emphasize is value. Lived experience is value. I think contextual knowledge is really valued. As a scientist, I have my general knowledge, but you as residents, people who live in the situation, you have that what we call specificatory knowledge. You have specific knowledge. We need both to solve problems, right? When I do research and working with partners, I don't call folks I work with subjects. That's a problem, okay? You are participants, right? To me, when you use the word subject, language is important. It's like someone's less than. Your expertise is as valuable, in many cases, more value than mine. I don't live in West Virginia. I don't live in communities with environmental justice issues. I live in Bowie, Maryland. I don't like Bowie. I always say it's like Bowie is a food oasis, right? I have like 10 grocery stores within a mile of my house. Okay, I have a little bit of traffic. We don't have environmental justice problems. So when I go home, even with this great speech I'm giving y'all, I'm going to be good either way, right? Same thing about environmentalists. So when you're an advocate, it's one thing. We got to have more people who live in a situation, driving the fight, right? Getting those folks up and engaged. And some people, they may not be engaged because remember, they've been dumped on for so long. They've been crapped on for so long. They've been forgotten for so long, downtrodden for so long. So how can we give hope to the hopeless and voice to the voiceless? That's what's important about the work that y'all are doing. That's what's important about being able to sustain the fight. And that's not about science. That's again about values. That's again about humanity, right? That's what I want y'all to lead with here today. Humanity, values, solidarity, organizing. Okay, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. Y'all say that. And don't say that for me. Say that for later. I still got to get y'all riled up a little bit more. Okay, so a lot of the science that I do, and this speaks to, so this question about science and the value of science. There's a value of science, and there's the values that we bring to science. I breathe my lived experience to science that I do. As I said earlier, I came from a community with some of these issues. So I want to use the best science to get the best data to solve the problem, okay? And I think when you're doing the work that we do, for me as a scientist, I tell my students, you got to do all 5 dimensions of science to impact change. It's just not good enough to study a problem. Because to me, if you just study a problem and you helicopter in and out, you're a pain pimp too. Okay? If you're just doing extractive science, you are a pain pimp too. That's not good enough. Now, some people, it may be their values. They don't value doing more. Okay, fine. But don't be up front then. Be behind. Be in the back. We want scientists who are putting their, who are going to put their necks out there. It's really interesting over the last few years that scientists all of a sudden, because of the new administration, they're worried about their funding. They all of a sudden they're woke. I'm like, where y'all been at? Because it's about selflessness, not selflessness. Where you been at, scientists? Because you're going to lose your funding. Most of the work that we do, my team does, the revolution won't be televised, nor will it be funded. Most of the work we do is not funded. It's because I'm committed to it. Those are my values, okay? And so I was speaking to a gentleman who I think was talking about STEM and getting more youth engaged. I forget where are you at? He had to go. So the reason I want to emphasize what he said is we got to train more folks who come from these communities who are dealing with these issues to go back to address the problems, who have the lived experience, who have the contextual knowledge. That's important. Not saying if you don't have it, you can't participate. But I'm just saying we need to have more folks who come from communities getting this training. Then again, like when I do work in communities, it may be difficult to engage folks. Remember, people are working full-time jobs. They may have multiple jobs. They may be busy. Some folks are in survival mode. So how can you get them connected? How can you connect to that spirit of action and engage them in a way where we can increase communities, so the collective activism, right? Increase their agency. I try to think about, the 2 hands of engagement: issues, impacts, opportunities, benefits, and partnerships. What are the issues? What are the impacts? What are the opportunities for us to engage each other? What are going to be the benefits? And from the science perspective, scientists, many of us think about, doing the science and getting published. And I tell my colleagues all the time, when you publish, that's not about the community. That's about you. That's about tenure and promotion. I am tenured, so I'm done. We don't have to worry. But I can say this now. I have been promoted as associate. But then what are the benefits to the community? And being transparent about your why. What's your why? Why are you there? And understand the community's why. The community wants change. So how you bring that together, how you have some consensus building, and that leads to the partnership. And for me, any issue that you work on could be connected to food, faith, family, health, and jobs. Any issue that I work on, food, faith, family, health, and jobs. And so that for y'all, when you, in particular, I asked the question about where's the Black community at? I don't see any of the residents who the cemetery descendants in this room, right? How can we build those relationships? I know you're trying. Can we do it through some of the, faith? You're trying to do the churches, I know. Who else can we bring in? Jobs. Remember I said before, when you talk about these type of industries, it's not about jobs. How you build strong economies. That's what, and then West Virginia, just in general, how we build a stronger West Virginia economy that benefits everybody and not just a few. So another thing that I do in my work is what we call citizen science or community science. And all it really is really democratization of science. And some of the old school citizen science is more the bird watching stuff. But I want to kind of get into how I know. I mean, it's cool. No, it's cool. No, it's cool. No, it's cool. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. No, one of my colleague, Karen Cooper, she used to work at the Cornell's Department of Ornithology, so we're good. Okay. No, I'm just saying, it's not a bad thing. I love bird. I love nature. You know, I got 15 4x4 raised beds in my backyard. I got 80 pots on my deck. I'm putting in some fruit cocktail trees. You know what those are? They're grafted trees. I got 2 fruit cocktails I'm putting in my yard, so I'm good. We're good now. We're good. What I'm saying is, I mean, you have a lot of this old school kind of citizen science, but what's important about it's empowering, right? You can democratize science. And so when you think about the benefits of citizen science, engaging communities, governance, shared vision, shared knowledge, and technology. And I know there's some back and forth about the technology. I'll get into that. And then really increasing people's literacy. And I heard a comment about education earlier, and I agree with that comment. To me, it's not about education. It's about increasing people's critical literacy. How you increase that awareness, the knowledge and awareness, would lead to more agency and more action. Right? You can be educated and still on the sideline and still be passive. Critical literacy is about making people active. Increasing their knowledge so they can be more, get out there and do something with it. So I'm not going to cover all of this, but this gets to the sort of tension that we have right now when it comes to monitoring. And again, I do a lot of air quality monitoring. So let me just kind of cover a little bit of this. If you look in the middle, I want to cover what's in the middle. So I made a comment earlier about, the sparse network of EPA monitors. I think previous speakers talked about federal reference method monitors, right? So federal reference method monitors are monitors that are used for regulations. That's data as frame that can stand up in the court of law, okay? Now, when you think about the monitoring that we want to do here, and that needs to be done, to me, no instrument, no monitoring program is infallible, right? Whether it be industry data, government data, or community data. It's all about the quality assurance, quality control plans. It's all about the data management, analysis, interpretation. And so I just want to emphasize that because on my next slide, I'll dig into it a little bit more. So don't worry about the acronyms, but I already talked about federal reference method monitors. So we have FRM monitors, again, regulations, enforcement, court of law, that kind of data. You have near FRM monitors. We have what we call federal equivalency method monitors. They are ones that can be substituted for the FRMs. They're actually, and the point about it is, as you move from left to right, they become less accurate. Okay, there's less specificity. There's more bias in the monitors. Also, but the price point improves. And so you have near FEM and you have more we call indicator grade monitors. These are monitors that are really popular now, like the AirBeam, like Purple Air. If you want to learn more about different types of monitors, from FRM to indicator grade, you can go to the EPA's Citizen Science Toolbox. And so there's some information about these monitors. Also, there's a group in California, Anna, I'm about to forget the name. What is it?
Global monitoring.
Global monitoring, yeah. Global community monitoring. And then what's the other?
I'm blanking on it.
The South Coast Air District. South Coast Air Quality Management District. AQ Spec, that's it. Yeah, AQ Spec, they're a laboratory, they test a lot of these sensors. So there's some discussions earlier that talked about bias, and I think a gentleman in the back made a really good point about calibration. You can do monitoring with FEM, near FEM, with indicators, and what you want to do is you want to do co-location. And so you want to be able to do a correction. I think the gentleman mentioned it, do a correction so you can really see how your indicator is really linking up with the FEM grade. And the reason why I say that is, if you look at the inverted pyramid, even if, and this is a point where some people may not agree with this, you shouldn't be focused on FRM, in my opinion, because that's part of the playbook. I said to a community member, I'm working in Uniontown, Alabama, and I'll get to those slides, I think. Uniontown, Alabama. And she said that the state agencies, ADM said, well, if you're doing monitoring of the landfill, you got to have FRM. We're only going to accept FRM data. That may be true, but there's utility. My point is, there is utility in other types of monitors. So the biggest impact that you can have with doing this citizen science air quality monitoring is educational awareness and empowerment. Then, if you want to, have better data, more accuracy, more precision, you want it for public health research, you want to start getting more to near FEM or FDM. And then for local ordinances, probably FEM is good, near FEM. And then for regulations and lawsuits, you want to be near FRM or FRM. But my point in saying this is, if you got people who've been engaged, you got to have good chain of custody. You can use the EPA's own QA/QC protocols, assurance plans, as a template for your plan, right? That's what we're talking about. That's how you open up the technology to communities and still be able to follow rigorous scientific principles so that data has utility for education and empowerment, public health research, local ordinance, regulations, lawsuits. Now again, it'd be great to have FRMs, but let me say this. I bought some FRMs. I just work in Charleston, South Carolina. I do a lot of work in a lot of places. I mean, Alabama and South Carolina and North Carolina. I bought 4 FRMs in 2009. They cost me $130,000. What if I had that money today? I could have multiple air quality campaigns in multiple parts of the country, okay? But so the thing is, we didn't have the technology then. The technology is getting better. And so there are some issues with indicated grade sensors, but eventually, and y'all can look this up, I was on the National Academy of Science Committee on Exposure Science in the 21st Century, and we talked about ubiquitous monitoring and embedded sensor networks as part of the future for exposure monitoring. Okay, so the technology on the air side is getting there. On water, I don't think we're close. And other, we're not close, but air, we're getting there. Let me keep it moving. So let me just, how am I looking on time? 5 minutes? Okay, let me go through a few communities real quick. Okay, so just to highlight. So done work in Mebane, North Carolina. They were building a highway. This is more on water. The community didn't have basic amenities. They didn't have sewer and water infrastructure. They're going to build a highway through these primarily historic black communities. This is where they're going to build it through black churches and cemeteries I mentioned earlier. This is my first experience as a grad student with this, okay? We came with a community-driven research model called community-owned and managed research. Community owns the research. They drive the research. That's an important framework for empowerment. And so we did some research. I can't go into great detail. And the thing about also the publications, I don't want to jump on publications, dissemination. Most of my publications, early in my career, I have 10 publications with this community partner. Okay, 10. I have more publications with them than I do on my dissertation. My dissertation is on industrial hog farms, which is another issue for chicken farms in West Virginia. And of course, y'all know chicken farms on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Okay, but we were able to work with community to stop the highway. Okay, we were able to get them first-time installation of sewer and water infrastructure. These communities are what we call pre-New Deal communities. Pre-New Deal. They didn't have sewer and water infrastructure. Okay, so that's the power of communities using science. Uniontown, just brief. So this mountain you see right here, this is a 4 million ton sale of fly ash, coal ash, right there. 4 million ton sale. What do you see right here? What is that? A black cemetery. They built the landfill on top of the black cemetery. Okay, so when I said before, what's happening here is not unusual. It happens all the time. Okay? They also have an archaic sewage waste management system. They contain the human waste in a containment pond, and they spray it on the fields like hog waste. So what you see that green, that's human waste. It's human waste. So we've been doing some work in Uniontown to bring in this co-located monitoring with FEM grade and indicated grade sensors. But the issue is we're doing a good job on the criteria air pollutants, but they have ammonia hydrogen sulfide issues. So, those are the HAPs, right? And so we're trying to figure out the HAP side. But this is again, just want to give you an example of communities that we're working in, okay? And this is hard work. So they're dealing with some of the same kind of stuff that y'all are dealing with, but the landfill also takes in trash from 33 states. So Alabama is basically a state, is a dumping ground for the whole country. There's trash coming from all parts of the U.S. into the community, okay? And we're working together on this. And you see me in the photo doing community engagement work. Curtis Bay, to skip this, community, South Baltimore, the Port of Baltimore, port issues, goods movement issues. I just want to say, you can see disparities in income, disparities in health. They at one point in time under the toxic release inventory were the most toxic zip code for air releases in the country. Okay, so in 2000, 2007, 2008, out of almost 9,000 zip codes. And I just want to emphasize the power of one person. This young lady, Destiny Watford, organized a campaign to stop a new incendiary from coming into the community. And they were able to stop it. We provided technical assistance to them. And she won the Goldman Award for environmental activists based on the Nobel Peace Prize for North America in 2016. So that's what, the reason why I show this is the power of one person, okay? Brandywine, Maryland. Brandywine is unincorporated. Black community is unincorporated. So when you're unincorporated, it's contamination without representation, okay? They have 5 power plants in a 13-mile radius, 3 in a 3-mile radius. They have over 10 surface mine operations. They have a sludge lagoon. They have a Superfund site. And they have 3,500 diesel trips per day. They're in the process of building the 2 gas-fired power plants. And think about it. Oh, gas is better. When you burn gas, what do y'all get? You still get combustion byproducts, right? This is ridiculous. And so some of these pipeline issues that y'all dealing with, just coming to these so this gas issues and pipelines that you're dealing with is an issue for our whole region. And that's why we have to be working together across states. Okay? So just to kind of keep moving, I know I'm out of time. The only community park, the fly ash landfill is right by the only community park. So again, how you gonna put America first, put your kids first, right? So we've been working with them to do air quality monitoring. We were able to stop a special exemption on a permit extend the permit for this fly ash landfill recently. So that's a victory. So again, legal tools, I want to emphasize that. And they also, and this is important for your work and the work with the folks at the cemetery, they submitted a Title VI complaint about the differential permitting of the power plants in its community color. And they actually just had a settlement with the state agencies. So Title VI may be an angle for y'all to look at. Okay? And that's why I need y'all to come to the symposium, because we're going to have 2 or 3 sessions on Title VI and examples of what people have done to use Title VI successfully. Okay? I'm out of time, but another community I work in, this is a historic black church near a concrete plant. You see the black church? Okay, schools nearby, that's a concrete plant. Ernest Meyer, it's 40 feet away from the black church. Who was there first, the concrete plant or the black church? The black church was. Okay, black church was. So we've been working with them, again, doing air quality monitoring, basically using indicator grade sensors. Right? And we've been able to, diesel exhaust is a big problem. So when we're closed, I'll close here because I have another example. I'm going to close here. We've been able to use that data from an integrated grade monitoring as part of testimony. And so the purple air sensor, air beams, Atmo tubes, we have other more FEM grade sensors too. But we were able to use this data as part of testimony to stop this facility from expanding from a concrete block plant to bring in a concrete batching. So there is utility in this data if used correctly. Okay? So that's another success story. But I recommend if you're going to do air quality monitoring, you should do a combo of indicator grade and FEM grade monitoring. Okay? So I'll end there. I have way too many slides. There you go. Okay. Thank you. Do I have time for like a question or two? Okay. Oh, yeah, yes. Or 3 or 4?
So I looked up the information on that advisory council meeting that you're encouraging us to go to. The registration is closed now.
You can still go.
So we can register on site?
Yep, you can register on site. You can register on site.
Okay.
No, they're not going to stop anybody from registering.
Okay, so we come down Tuesday, early evening, stay for public comment, and then some of us come down for the other sessions.
You can come down for other sessions. And so a lot of our business meetings, you're not able to make a comment, but the public comment is the time for you to make your comments.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Some of us will be there.
Thank you. Other questions? Is it a question?
Yeah, about the monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
Your monitoring, which I thought was excellent, that we can use it's still used for education and all that kind of stuff. When you say coordinated, like you had that example, I mean, did you actually go around and say, we need one here, we need one here, we need one here, or was it just, how was it coordinated, and was everybody using the same thing?
So what we did was, and most of what we're doing with the communities, and that's why I talk about the community engagement, we work with the community to come with a monitoring plan. So monitoring plan to figure out so you have your list of sites. You have like your high priority sites, you have your, so the high, mid, low priority sites, and it's gonna be based on, is it open air? What part of the air column you wanna get? Do you wanna get more breathing zone? Do we have access to power? Is it near a stationary source? Is it near more traffic? And so we've done that in Bladensburg, and we're expanding it. We just got we have a working relationship with the Cheverly, the town of Cheverly. So we're going to help them build a hyper-local air quality monitoring network. So we're doing that, and the goal is, I just had a lunch meeting. I thought it was going to be adversarial, but it wasn't. But we'll see how it goes. I just had a lunch meeting. Cause I'm a jokey guy. I can get to know you and have a good relationship building with you. With the new director of the Department of Environment for Prince George's County. So the goal behind the Cheverly Hyperlocal Air Quality Monitoring Network was actually to expand it to be a county-wide, for it to be a nucleus of a county-wide air quality monitoring network. So it's passive, as I said before, and then if something comes up around permitting or whatever, we have some data, and then you can look at cumulative impacts. And we've been looking at criteria air pollutants, but we also look at some hazardous air pollutants as well. So that's what we're trying to do. And also the ultimate goal is MDE. Why are we doing your job? You should be doing that. That's the Maryland Department of Environment. Why are we doing this? So the idea is, even if you have indicator grade sensors, you got a signal, right? Okay, state agency, we think something's going on. Could you come in and do some more monitoring? That's another benefit of indicator grade. But I think you want to do, again, combo at FEM grade and indicator grade. Okay? Other questions? Yes.
I've studied the documents with MD.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi. The 990 megawatt power plant scheduled for Brandywine needs to be cooled. They want to use 5 million gallons of water. That doesn't get recycled. It goes into the air. They're going to get the water from the Piscataway wastewater treatment plant. They call it treated effluent. And according to WSSC, it's going to be delivered as is. And when was the last time you bought something as is? You probably didn't want it. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no guarantees. And Piscataway wastewater treatment plant, within the last 2 years, has had 2 major spill. I'm talking millions of gallons of you-know-what on site. So who would trust them? Again, that's a whole area, and that vapor, that water vapor, is going into the air right across the street from where people live. And the 990 megawatt power plant is the equivalent of 7 747 jets sitting at full throttle right across the street from where people live there in Brandywine. MDE knows about this, but they... No, you're exactly right. That's part of the problem is we're relying on state agencies. In many cases, they are biased towards industry. They are biased towards industry. And so that's why we have to do more. But even with that, though, a lot of state agencies, they use the excuse of our budget's been cut. We're losing staff. But, you knew about these issues before you had budget cuts and losing staff. So what I think, and actually to use the proper term, that's a boo-boo bomb. That's what it is. Every day you have boo-boo bombs in the air. So think about bioaerosols with microbial constituents that you're going to be exposed to. So fecal matter basically being aerosolized. Right? And so you could be exposed to E. coli, Campylobacter, Salmonella, other types of biological agents in that boo bomb. So I think what's important is for people to, more folks, with the settlement may help, but it's not. I don't think the settlement's going to stop the power plants. But I think the settlement's going to help the state agencies do more, because as part of the settlement, they have to have an environmental coordinator. It may not mean much because a lot of agencies have environmental coordinators and doesn't do anything. But they have to have some compliance guidelines with Title VI. Title VI has been around, Civil Rights Act has been around for a long time. Many agencies in Maryland have not had guidelines to comply with Title VI. But guess what? In the Civil Rights Act, that's the problem in many states. Most states do not have, their agencies do not have compliance guidelines for complying with Title VI or complying with the Civil Rights Act in general. So, hopefully the settlement can help with that, but we're going to have to do some monitoring, and we're a little bit behind in getting our monitoring up and running in Brandywine. Okay. Other questions? We're out of time. Okay. Thank you. I'll be still here.
And then discussion at the end.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
And then, we've got some fungible time down here. People are so engaged in this, I don't think they're going to leave.
Okay. Okay.
So we just take advantage of everybody's day.
Yeah, that's right. All right, I'll introduce.
Okay.
So our next speaker is Anna Maria Rule, who's an assistant professor at Johns Hopkins in their School of Public Health and Department of Environmental Health and Engineering.
Thank you very much. What exposure assessment is, and it's going to be super fast. And then where and how EPA and your local agencies, state monitors, we've talked about this. So I'm just going to rush through it. Some of the methods and equipment that they use, how else can we measure pollutants, what is available, and Segovia already alluded a little bit to it. I'm going to try to address some of these questions of where to sample, how many. But it's a lot, so I'll just give you some resources, I think. So exposure assessment in a nutshell is part of the whole risk assessment effort, and which helps you identify the contaminants, where are the sources, or which are the sources, what is the environmental media, are we talking about air or water or a combination, the fate and transport, where is it going, where is it getting to, who is getting exposed, and then the routes of entry, are you really exposed, and are you exposed indoors or outdoors or where, and so exposure assessment is all about measuring, because if you don't measure it, and we've talked about this, you don't know what it is. So what is the intensity, the frequency, the duration of the exposure, the spatial and the temporal variability, because the exposures are not going to be static. You're not going to be exposed to this one value all the time. And the population exposed. That's the most important thing for exposure assessment. And so, as has been already mentioned, EPA has a sparse. If you look at the U.S. map, it's actually pretty dense in the urban areas, but it's still, we know, very sparse. And so there are state and local area monitoring stations called SLAMs, that they are mainly put in urban locations. So if you're in a rural location, you're not going to get one of those. There's a photochemical assessment monitoring station that is also located in urban, and they measure for ozone, the nitrogen oxides, and the VOCs. There's another called the Improve network that is placed on state parks and is a little bit of monitoring the secondary air pollutants. So, but the air pollution is doing to the environment, not so much focused on human health. The Clean Air, the Trends network, they are located in rural locations, and they are very sparsely located. And then the Speciation Trends Network, which we haven't talked about a lot today because there's just so much information, but not all PM 2.5 is created equal. Depending on the sources, you may have more metals, different kinds of metals, some other pollutants that are associated with this particular matter. And so even though we know particulate matter in general is bad, some particulate matter contaminants are worse than others. So the Speciation Trends Network trying to address these differences between the PM. And so I tried to look for a map of the West Virginia local, but I couldn't find it. Maybe I didn't spend enough time, but I did find this table. Table. And so depending on the county that you are, that's the type of monitor. So I think right now we're in Berkeley County, right? Yeah. And so, Jefferson. So down. There you go. So that's what happens in a lot of communities. There is just no monitor. And I know we've talked about this.
We never had heavy industry. We never had heavy industry.
Exactly. So, and you're not a big urban site, which is great. So a typical slums or state and local ambient monitoring station, it looks like this, and you may have seen some. They're typically located by roadside. They're typically trying to stay away from obvious sources because they want to, like we said before, they want to capture an average. At the time when the Clean Air Act was enacted, this was a really good thing because we didn't even have those averages, those like baseline, what is happening where. So they were set up pretty much in the 70s, and the technology has been improving, but the regulations haven't. So we're stuck in that same framework. And what's inside of those trailers is a ton of equipment, like Jacoby was saying, $50,000, $60,000 each one of those monitors. That one of them measures ozone, one of them measures nitrogens, oxides, and so on and so forth. And so it's impossible for every person to have one of these to measure their own personal exposure. And so I don't want to get into the details, but just to address, these monitors are actually pretty accurate, and they are precise. They do a very good job of measuring the pollutant in question. And they're very efficient, but they are very expensive, and they are very expensive to maintain. You need one person, full-time person, just to do a good job of maintaining them and making sure that the quality of the data is good. And they're complicated. Not everybody can get one of these up and running. And the same for particulate matter, right? It's high-volume vacuum pumps, typically, or even the real-time monitor. They are just complicated equipment, pieces of equipment. And why don't they do a good job? Because, and we have talked about this already, because they are designed to capture regional average pollutants. They don't capture local sources. They don't capture personal exposures. So they cannot provide communities with like the answers to those questions. And I have this chart that I have. This actually, if you can see in yellow is the, I can't actually see from here, but in yellow is the control site, the outdoor site, and in black is in yellow is the central site, central monitoring site. And if I co-locate one monitor with the central outdoor monitoring site, they might correlate pretty well. I don't know if you can see the yellow and the black are pretty much one on top of the other. But if I have a monitor, a personal monitor, and I go inside the house, and this happens to be a smoker, then it's not correlation, right? The exposures are not the same. So you cannot capture the personal exposure with the outdoor monitor. And then I'm going to talk a little more about the quality control. So like Kobe was saying, we have, the technology has been improving enormously. And so we now have a lot of these indicator type sensors that are not high quality and high precision and accuracy, but they give you pretty decent information, and especially the particulate matter. The monitors for particulate matter are actually very good. When you collocate them with a federal reference method, you get very good correlation if you calibrate them properly, and I'm going to get to that a little bit. But we also have these new monitors that are now showing, I don't know, I don't think I have a pointer, but like this one, the flow, actually, besides the PM, you can actually have nitrogen oxides and VOCs, volatile organic compounds, that are emitted from power plants and gas stations and that kind of thing. There's the Atmo tube that also has like different monitors. So we can start to address a combination of pollutants with low-cost sensors and like Sagobi was saying, start getting these a lot of the monitors so that you can have a sense of the variability within the region. And so, but before we sample, we need to develop an approach. And this is what Sagobi was saying. And you don't have to be an environmental, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, and you don't have to be an expert. Because a lot of it is common sense. So what is the question? Depending on what the question that you want to answer is where you want to put these monitors. Like, who will be exposed? Are you trying to answer a specific question about this school? Then you want the monitors to be closer to the school. Are you trying to answer a question about more of the bigger community? Then you want a bigger network. What kind of measurements are needed? Do you need particulate matter? Are you interested in ammonia or any other pollutant? Then you have to look for it. And what kind of quality? Like Sagobi was saying, you can have these low-cost sensors, but you may want to be careful what your question is. If it's going to be to be in front of the lawyers, then you co-locate it and you make sure that you have both kinds of measurements. You want to know how pollutants change, because that is very important, right? Are you going to be exposed every day to the same thing or not? Which sensors to use? What resources are needed? That's very important, and everybody should have this plan. Do you need funding to do it, right? Because they're not cheap. They're cheaper. But you still, if each one of those sensors costs about $200 and you want to have a network of, 10, 15, then you need a little bit of capital, and then who's going to be using them, who's going to be calibrating them. And so very important things to consider are what you want to show with your measurement. So, second to last bullet there, develop standard operating procedures. And it's already been talked about a little bit, but if you have a solid procedure and everybody sticks to that procedure, then you can prove that you have been, that you have reproducible data. And so you have to have adequate training on how to use these things. And so first you need to know also that to be able to work, there's airflow needs to be going to the sensor. How many, are you interested in fence line monitor, right close to the point source that you're interested? Are you interested in personal monitor? Do you want to measure the gradient from a source into the community to see how far that pollution goes? Most of the gas sensors interfere with some other gases, and that is something that you need to be aware of. And they also interfere with relative humidity. So it's very important, if you need to measure two things at a time, there are sensors to do it, and you just need to know what are the limitations of your sensor. Talking about quality control, like Sagobi was saying, quality assurance and quality control, you need to calibrate your sensor, because the data that you get out of it is only going to be as good as the calibration of your sensor. So calibrate before, calibrate during, and the calibration typically involves co-locating your sensor with a reference method. And this is completely doable. And if possible, expose it to different levels so that you know which response it is at different concentrations. In order to evaluate the precision or the variability of your sensor, you typically deploy it for multiple times at multiple different concentrations so that you have this range and you know what the variability is. And same with the evaluate bias. You have to just know what your sensor is capable of and be able to, when you actually present the data, defend it and say, yes, I have this calibration, this is how my monitor works, and this is why I trust my data. So for example, we deploy these PM 2.5 monitors by the reference method at the local monitor. And I don't know if you can see, but the black line in the top panel is the actual reference method. And when it was going up, all the sensors were going up, and when it was going down, the sensor responses were going down, but they were not falling one on top of the other, which was because of the relative humidity. So we were also measuring relative humidity. Once we put them back together, and you have a little equation to control for those, they fall in line. So you can show that. You can show, like, after I've done that, then you have to trust my data. And so you can go back and be confident in your results. And so sensor maintenance is very important. Of course, you have to make sure that you do this periodically. And then data review, and the person that's going to talk after me is going to talk a little bit more about that. So now you have a lot of data, because these sensors can give you minute by minute information. So now you have this ton of data. What do you do with it? And how to do like a little bit of quality control and make sure that it's understandable and that it's translatable to people. And there's a lot of things that can and have been done. I finished. I don't know if I have time for questions, or maybe a couple of clarifying questions, because we're going to have a panel afterwards, and we're going to be able to reply to some other questions. But we'll do it in a panel. Okay. So you have a question?
I think a lot of us have seen movies like What Lies Upstream and The Devil We Know. This is a little droll, but you get the impression that only when someone gets sick and dies are they ready to go to court and sue. If you know my point, the data doesn't seem to be effective against a large corporation to have causality strongly proven between that and someone who gets sick and dies. That's the one little qualm I have about with everything I've heard today.
Well, that's why epidemiologists are so important, because epidemiologists can take our data and look at the population and give you correlation and causation. But I agree, it's not easy, especially on a one-by-one basis. And so then let me introduce, I forgot my notes.
Dr. Kelly Jones.
Dr. Kelly Jones. I had my little notes, but I forgot. So actually, this is the first time I see her in person. We've been emailing, but that's it. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Go ahead.
Ready? Okay, I am Kelly Jones. I'm a research fellow at the National Socio-Environmental Synthesis Center. Thank you all for inviting me here today. I am going to talk about, so you're collecting data, now what? I'm a scientist, and so I love data more than I love candy, but I'm also a nurse. And so I'm morally obligated to take that data and say, what does this mean? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my kids? What does this mean for your kids? How can I take this data and how can I make it work? So what I'm going to do is talk just a little bit about all this data that we've been talking about today and what you as individuals can do with it. I'm going to have two takeaways that I hope you get from my speech today. The first is that data is not magic. So that's the sad takeaway. You're going to have all this data that you want. That's not good enough. You have to put in a lot of hard work afterwards. I get the impression that in this room there's quite a bit of statistical acumen, but what I'm going to give you today is an approachable tool that you can take to a busy family, to somebody that hasn't spent the last 2 decades thinking about math. And so you're going to be able to use this data in a way that's going to hopefully be able to be useful for you making decisions on a daily basis about how to keep your own family safe and healthy. So given that I'm trying to make a point that data is not magic and that you're going to put in a lot of work, the second takeaway is going to be that data is in fact magic. A lot of people today have already made this point, and I'm just really going to reemphasize it, that data is really, really important, and I encourage you all to take it seriously and to take its collection and its control very seriously. So first off, data is not magic. We've been talking a lot about air quality data. Air quality data is only one tiny piece of this puzzle. You need a lot more data too. So let's say we have some kids at an elementary school that we're a little concerned about in the future, something like that. We need to know what's going on with these kids. So what's happening with these children every single day is a data point that we want to be collecting and we want to be monitoring. The air quality data. Hopefully, I do believe that this community is going to be getting an air qual sensor. That is fantastic. That's local. It's going to give you really excellent data about what's going on day to day in your community. There are also maybe some regional monitors. Air Now is the place where you can get access to the EPA monitors. There is one in Martinsburg. You all come from here. You know that it's a really hilly place. You know what happens to the weather here. You know how the ridges go. I do not know if what is happening in Martinsburg is going to be related to what's happening to where you live. So you have to bring your local knowledge to that bit of information and find out if you think it's good. Purple Air is a commercial source for air quality monitors. That the monitors are actually really fantastic. One of the really fantastic things about Purple Air is that the data from those monitors gets uploaded onto a map that everybody has access to. There's already 4 Purple Air monitors in this region. I just checked right now. You have access to the data that those monitors are collecting at this minute. So what's happening right now in a Purple Air area, you know exactly what's happening there. The Purple Air monitors are also color-coded by the EPA's air quality flag color codes. So if you open the map and you see that everybody in your area has green colors, you know what that means. If they start turning yellow, you know what that means. Other things are associated with the children's response, adults' response to respiratory situations, including the weather, including pollen. There's also monitors. There's a monitor in Martinsburg about what's going on with the pollen count. Also, you can look outside. Some of you are gardeners. I'm sure some of you know that when this tree starts to go, you start feeling things. So just be aware that those are other information that you want to take into account. So this is the tool that I'm going to show you. All I did was I went and I Googled calendar. And this little guy came up. It's a nice empty calendar. This is really all you need. So you have all these data sources. Let's say that you're collecting air quality data every single day. You can put a sticker. You can have your kid or your grandkid put a sticker. What is the air quality that day? This is a perfect place to start. Then, what's that kid feeling today? They come home at the end of school and they say, how did you feel? They draw a little face on the calendar right there. This is how I felt today. We're interested in what's happening with the weather. We add that. Sunny day, rainy day, blowy day. And then, like I said, the pollen. You can add that up. These are days when things are really getting crazy. So this map, it just went from simple, easy, manageable to a little bit out of control, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, so it's going to happen, but you can take it one step at a time. So let's go back. First thing that you're going to want to do in this situation, you've been monitoring these things. Take a step back. Look at just this bit. Look for patterns. It looks like in this neighborhood, by the way, I just made this up out of my head so that it was going to have some patterns, so it doesn't mean anything. But in this neighborhood where I live, something happens on Thursdays. Maybe there's a local factory that does something every Thursday. Maybe Thursday is when my trash gets picked up, and so there's an idling trash truck in the neighborhood. Something's going on Thursdays. So now that I've seen that pattern, I'm very interested to see what's happening with my kid on Thursdays. In fact, more Thursdays than not, my kid is experiencing some kind of trouble. These are the kinds of patterns and relationships that you don't have to have years and years of statistical training to start to be able to see. You just have to have the data and you have to have it visualized in a way that you're able to look at and see these relationships. So we've got that relationship. Maybe we can, now we're feeling strong about that, we can take it one step further. Let's take a look at what happens the day before my kid is feeling bad. So we can see that, a couple of these days when our kid is feeling bad, something bad happened the day before. The air quality wasn't great. There's another kind of pattern that you're interested into, the pattern that's associated with the temporal lag between the event and the outcome. There's always going to be crazy things happening. So on the 2nd, my imaginary child, he had a history test, so he was very, very sick and couldn't go to school. There's no reason for this, but this is the report that I'm getting from my data source, because the quality of my data is not reliable if it comes from an 8-year-old. Also, what's going on with the 1st of the next month? That's the day that I'm expecting my child to have troubles. Well, the 1st of that month, it's rained. All of the problems got rained out of the atmosphere and my kid was fine. So this is the kind of thing that you're going to have to take time, you're going to have to collect a lot of data, but then these patterns are going to start to become available to you. And they can be as complicated as you want. You can include pollen, you can include weather, you can include all these different things. Or they can be as simple as you want. What this is going to allow you to do, though, is you can, once you have these patterns established, you know that on this kind of weather, on this day of the week, your kid sometimes has troubles. So then you can make decisions. If you have the choice to go for a bike ride or to go to the community center and play basketball, maybe that day that you know that your kid is going to have trouble, you go and make the basketball choice. Maybe on that day before he goes out the door, you say, hey, do you have your rescue inhaler with you? I'm going to strongly recommend that when you start making these behavior changes, though, you also write down those behavior changes. If you use a weekly nebulizer, please make note of when that weekly nebulizer goes on there, because if your behavior changes are effective, then what you're going to notice is that over time, your patterns are going to go away. And what's going on there? Is that indicative that your pattern wasn't real? Or is it indicative that your behavior changes are actually working and your child is able to tolerate these things better because you're doing things to make sure that you're keeping him or her healthy? So this is a really easy tool. Like I said, it can be simple. It can be very, very complicated, but it can be very, very useful. Do you have a question before we go on?
Two things. One is, do you suggest using apps at all? Can you air quality apps, or would you say go to Tuesday?
So if you have an app that you feel is providing you good enough data that changes enough, and as at a temporal level that is sufficient, so like a daily or sub-daily level, then go for it. Yeah.
And also, are you suggesting that this could be sufficient for like a larger kind of meta collection?
So I'm going to talk about that. That's going to come up. Yes. Yeah. So data is magic. Yes. This data is magic. It can be magic at a broader level. However, the data as I just presented it is not particularly useful. There's going to have to be additional more work to go on into that. But what I do recommend is that this data can go into a bigger community repository. What's happening in your house, what's happening in your family is one hugely important data point. It's the most important data point for your family, but it's only one out of a community's data point. We need a whole community's data point to understand not only what's happening at the population level, but to understand how these impacts differ across space and time and place and people. So yeah, keep these data, that calendar that you have maybe drawn. It's really useful data. Your pediatrician, we have one in the back. She was nodding. I think that maybe she would be interested in seeing these kinds of things. If you have them available, make sure that your plans are working out. If you can turn that data into kind of more standardized form, on this day, instead of just smiley faces, but even just turning it into a spreadsheet, have each day one going down. How does the child feel in the next column? How does, what's the weather going on? What's the air quality? Something like that. All of that can be brought in together, and all of a sudden we have more data points to be able to make these associations out of. If we have a community repository, I know that there's been some talk about a community-wide data gathering effort. That community repository can be a place to put all this data, and then for now, for the future, it's all available there. And it can maybe inform some decisions that go on down the line, maybe inform some decisions about other things that are happening. As you all know, Flint nothing would have ever happened there if there wasn't data available about what was happening to these children. So if you are concerned about what might be happening for your children, collect as much data as you possibly can, document where it came from, document what it is, document how you collected it, document how you're controlling it at this point on. Do I have any questions? Catherine Clark.